What's up? So we're in my garage for part 2 of the chef knife giveaway. So this is what I hammered out. Not exactly a chef looking knife, but we want it to look more like, like this. This is one I bought. I use this kind of like as a pattern, but I changed the slope a little bit so it's not so much like killer whale shape, but more of a straight line. But you'll see when we trace it out. But so first thing I gotta do is use my 72-inch belt grinder here, which is the most advanced piece of tech that I have. But what's good about it is it has a flat surface here, right here, for grinding and making the blade flat, because I don't have a surface grinder, which makes it completely, 100% flat. I have to kind of do that by eye, but my eye is pretty good. So I used to use this, which is a jig, and if you're just starting out, this is just a simple jig for, you clamp the knife to it, and you can set it to any angle, even 90 degrees, and run it across there like that. And if you're just starting out, I highly recommend the jig, but I do it all by hand now because you're doing long swords. This doesn't work on a sword because the sword would be hanging way over. So you got to get used to doing it by hand, and you'll learn as you go. You'll get the feel for it, and you just keep eyeballing it. You'll find center, So there we go. This is, you'll understand why you don't want to sit here and watch me do this the whole entire time. So I'll give you about a minute or so of what it does, and then we'll fast forward a little bit. Pick it up. I'll have to edit the video together, which I'm not that great at because I only got it, whatever's on my phone. But like I said, the production value is going to go up. Excuse the Christmas decorations in the background. We took them all down, but when we move to the shed, it'll be a little different. It'll be more like, I'll make it into like a little studio, I guess. But like I said, I'm just doing this for fun, and then for documentation for my kids someday when I'm gone, they can watch these videos, See, these are the deeper hammer marks where I was condensing the edge, and so I'll do a little more, but you can see how this is going to take a while. But what I like to do is get this off so I can see it in this side, and then I'll trace what I need to on here so I can see it, and then I'll either grind it off, or part of this I'm gonna have to cut with an angle grinder, and we'll show you later how, just because it would take longer to sit here and run it on this thing, but we'll do a little more so you can see. Quick note on this thing is it has a DC motor converter on it so that I can adjust the speed, so I can make it go faster or slower. Right now I got it at a slower, steady pace because it's taking a lot of material with this very low grit sandpaper. all those will come out because we got plenty of thickness. As a matter of fact, it's too thick, you know, way too thick. So we'll grind this all down till it's flat. And then I gotta get the top to where it's pretty much gonna be, because I gotta stamp it and I can't keep grinding it, but I wanna keep this thicker than you know, than when I do the, just for the quench so it doesn't warp. I talked about that in the last video. But all right, I'm gonna fast forward a bit, but you see how, you know, it's just a lot of that. And that noise is annoying, so I know you're not gonna wanna listen to that for 45 minutes, so we're gonna fast forward. All right, this is about an hour-ish later of just steady grinding. We still got a ways to go, but right now is what I want to do is make it look more like this one. So what I'll do is put it on top like so. It's not going to be exactly like it. I'm going to take trusty L Sharpie. Well, like I said, I don't necessarily like the top of this one so much. So what I do is I modify it a little bit. Still using most of the blade. And now what I like to do is more of a straight So some of this I'm going to cut with a 4-inch grinder, and then some of it I'm going to just use this to get to the line. I'll rough cut it with the grinder, and we're going to do that right now. So let me fast forward again another 5 minutes. I'll have it set up outside where I'm going to cut this. And then I'll show you how I cut this. Then I'm gonna bring it back in here and go back to grinding to get it to that finished shape. You see that? So this is what it looks like without it. You know, that was all done with a 4-pound sledgehammer, you know, to get it to this point. Now we give it to the finer than one, and then frog's hair. So fine you can't even see it. All right, so we're outside, set up on the horses. I got this thing clamped to the horses, and I got my 4-inch grinder with an abrasive cutoff wheel. Now as you cut, this thing wears away and gets smaller and smaller. See? And then what I'm gonna do is cut on the outside of those lines so that I got room to just grind down to them. So this is basically, and I had this made for me, but it's got the double extra layer of leather down here where most of the sparks hit. See how I cut outside the line? Now I'll grind down to that line, but I gotta finish cutting this up, and I gotta cut that out, the handle. So I'm sure you don't want to sit here and watch me do all that. If you do, let me know in the comments, and the next time I will record all of it, but otherwise it's really loud and usually time consuming. So we'll catch this back up when I get this all cut out and we're back inside. All right, so as you can see, cut along just like in kindergarten when you would cut out shapes. Same thing, but I had to get that rough shape forged out so that I could do this finer. Now to get to the line, we go back to old 72-inch belt grinder over here, which is really the king, and we kick it on. The idea, we're getting closer. Now this is where you actually you gotta be careful. You gotta be very careful at this stage because you could ruin the knife by over grinding. So this is where this is where the practice comes in. So I'm gonna go back to listening to some music because I can't stand that sound. I don't know about you. Either earplugs so I don't hear anything at all, or music so I don't hear that grinding. I'm sure you don't want to sit there and listen to that grind. I can add music to it, but then who knows what's going on down the line, you know what I mean? We're gonna find out though, together. All right, so this is many minutes of grinding later. See, it's still pretty thick, but I wanted that thick to quench it so that it doesn't warp. And then but when I grind it after I quench it, I have to keep it cool by dipping it. You know, I keep a bucket of water and I dip it in, grind. I mean, you can get, but you don't want to get it too hot again because you could lose the heat treatment, which is when we're going to quench it in the oil and it's going to tighten everything up and make it harder than woodpecker lips. But as you can see, it's come a long way, and I did drill an 1/8 inch hole for the bolster just to see if it would drill, so we don't have to. See, this is a bolster, but this one's actually called an integral bolster because it's part of the knife, which I may do down the road, but not on this knife. So we're gonna have bolsters there and then some sort of wood handle back here, but I'm gonna show you how I drill the holes, which I was lucky I was actually able to anneal this. Once the steel's annealed, then you could drill it. So we're going to drill the other 2 holes that I marked with a Sharpie, and this is how I do it. With it. One more. And these bits are just cold ball bits, I guess, from Harbor Freight. But I mean, I only get a few holes out of them, but for the price, boom. All right, so I got my holes drilled. I got it, you know, ground down to a nice, consistent, flat surface. So now, when I see these hammer marks will come out when because I got to grind the bevel in this. This is going to come down to like just a tiny, nice, sharp, razor sharp blade, and you'll be able to cut onions. But the spine, I'm going to keep the spine nice and thick. You know, back here mostly. Here it's going to get ground thinner because of the bevel, but back here the spine will be thick, so you could, you know, you could chop up a chicken or, you know, a lobster or whatever, or vegetables or whatever you cut up. So this is going to be one hell of a knife. Look at me. Basically, look at it. We took this and we made this. See that? Once I heat treat this, there's no way you could drill it. It's harder than, you know, plus it's 5160, so stay flexible, it won't snap. You want this, you do. So now what I gotta do is put my stamp in it, right here at the top, and then quench it in oil, you know, make sure it stays straight. Then I'll do all the more grinding, but I gotta keep it cool when I grind, so. And after that's all done and it's all grinded to finish proportions, then we do the bolsters and the handle. So next up is heat treat. All right, so here we are. I started the forge because, you know, you see me do it already, you know how it's done. And what I'm doing is heating up a piece of metal to heat up the oil where we're gonna quench. It doesn't look pretty, but it doesn't have to. Heat up the oil that we're going to quench the knife in after I stamp it with my stamp right there. So we're going to get this hot enough so I can stamp it. Then I'm going to have to re-straighten it because it's going to bend a little bit. And then get the edge hot, quench it, and let it cool off. And then look at from where we started to where we are now. It's a knife. No, that's an knife. So put it in there. Let it heat up. I'm also going to use my flatter hammer because I don't want to bang it up at this point because don't want to put any more big hammer marks in it. We're grinding all the hammer marks out so it's nice and smooth. First thing we'll do is we'll heat it up and we will stamp it. Then I'm gonna put it back in there. And I'm gonna straighten it out. And like I said, we'll do one thermal cycle. We'll let it cool down, and then we'll put it back in there, heat it up, quench it. So you're seeing the whole process of me making this knife, and then you're gonna have it. You'll know exactly where it came from. But it's an excellent knife. You can't go wrong. It's a solid high carbon steel knife. Like I said, Julia Child. Some people may not know who Julia Child was. She was a famous chef. She had her own show. She trained I think she was one of the first women to train at La Cordon Bleu in Paris, France, which is a culinary school, and like the most famous culinary school. And she learned French cuisine. She made a cookbook about it. But she loved high carbon knives. I would love to make a knife for Julia Child. I'll make a knife for anybody that's like a famous chef. I'll make you a knife for free. Alright. It's ready to stamp. It happens quick. Stamp. Alright. I gotta straighten it out a little bit because I put a little dent in the spine. So I'm just gonna work it, make it flat again. Then, like I said, we'll let it cool off and put it back in, we'll let it cool off, and then in the meantime, I gotta heat the oil up at the one that's been cooking. At this point, it's all about Happy Gilmore. It's all about tap it in. So we're gonna let it cool for a minute. This is called thermal cycle. So it's pretty straight now. Let me hit the bottom. We'll let it cool down again, and then we'll put it in one more time, and we'll quench it. And then after that, I'm not gonna film it, but I'm going to put it in the oven at 200 degrees, 250, let it bake for about 4 hours. That's called tempering. Then let it cool down naturally, because you don't want it to crack or break. Hopefully it doesn't break when I quench it, because I can't have it, and then all this work is for naught. You don't want to put it in cold oil. And I got my oil pan facing north and south. That's an old, something I heard, because it's like the magnetism can make the blade kink. So, because it's non-magnetized now, but it will become magnetized when it gets quenched. By the color, by eye. I'm not going to tell you what color because everybody sees colors different, so I just know by what color it turns when to quench it, and that's, I've tested them, and that seems to be. I don't know exactly what Rockwell scale they are, because I don't have a Rockwell file set, but I'm going to get one. This is all stuff I'm going to get. I'm going to get a bandsaw, which would be easier to cut than using that grinder to cut the oversized pieces off and stuff like that. That'll all come as I can afford it, but, family first, and then this is a hobby second. Alright, now I gotta watch it. That's when I gotta quench it. The more you get used to, the more you do it, the more you get used to seeing the color, or what color you need to quench it at. Probably pull it up. It might be a little warped, so I might have to straighten it real quick, but then it's going to go into oil. good news is she didn't crack or break, and it's straight. So, you know, the next step now, I like to let it cool a little bit further before I put it down on the anvil, because that also, because I usually just edge clench it. See how I just clenched? So that this part of the spine will stay a little bit softer than the edge itself, which is going to be hard. You should be able to cut a nail with this thing. You know what I'm saying? This is hardened high carbon steel. Now I got to stick it, well, I got to let it cool off so I can handle it. Then I throw it on an oven pan and stick it in the oven about 250, and I bake it at about a 250 for about 450. So we'll pick it up again after that. All right, so we heat treat. Quenched it in oil, then I put it in the oven at 250 degrees for about 4 hours and let it cool down slow. And then I did some more grinding over here for hours. You can see that. See the I'm just going to show you, because I'm going to do a little bit more grinding, and then it'll be ready to polish and do the handle. But this will be the end of this video. See here? See the arrows on the belt? This is a 72-inch belt. The arrow's got to go in the way of the drive wheel. So put it like so. Arrow's coming this way. And we're going to do a little final grinding. I need the gloves. Try not to let it get too hot. I have to keep dipping it in water. This is what it's doing. The angle I'm doing is all by eye and by hand. You see how flat we're getting it? You don't want a convex edge, you want a nice flat edge for the stuff that just, as you slice through it, go right off. Going back and forth over the flat like that gives it nice and flat. See how flat that is? There's no more hammer marks on either side. And that's just with the belt grinder. So when I polish it all up, this will be super shiny. And it's got my stamp on there on that side. See, this part has to be bigger because that's where the bolsters are.
That's the ricassos, and bolsters will be over top of that.
So still a bit more work to do, but we see we're getting there.